Next, we will have our panel discussion about data governance and privacy. And Roshan will join the panel discussion. We are very pleased also have the Sharon Bauer, the founder of Bamboo Data Consulting, join our session. I will do a quick introduction about Sharon. Sharon is the founder of Bamboo Data Consulting, a privacy and a security consulting firm. And actually, Sharon is my good friend. I know Sharon has been named as a top 20 women in cybersecurity in Canada. And she provided privacy solutions to companies like in technology, marketing, retail, fintech, health, and education, many companies. I also personally benefit from Sharon's expertise. And Sharon acts as also actually as a virtual chief privacy officer because not every company can afford a chief privacy officer. And she uses privacy to protect the business of today and also build valuation for tomorrow. And Sharon, before Sharon founded her company, she was a litigator for 10 years, which will bring a lot of regulatory compliance expertise. And also she previously worked at KPMG, as you know, the well-known consulting firm. All right, so we have two experts here. So I will act as a panel moderator. And for people online, feel free to submit your questions. So I will do my best to also ask on behalf of you to our panel speakers. All right, so before we start our panel questions, I did some introduction of both of you, but I'd like to give you maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute to talk a little bit about yourself, your version about yourself. Since Roshan just finished talking, let's start with Sharon first.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the panel. And Roshan, I loved your presentation. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great. So as Brian said, my name is Sharon Bauer. I'm the founder of Bamboo Data Consulting. I see someone in the chat wrote, why the Bamboo name? Great question. And I can go on and on, but I'm not going to. Check out our website, bamboodataconsulting.com, and you'll see why Bamboo. I work with small to medium businesses and startups, and we help them first and foremost identify privacy risks. We benchmark them against relevant legislations and standards, but really where our bread and butter is building privacy programs end to end. And unfortunately, small to medium businesses often either don't have the budget or the resources to hire large companies to do this for them. And so we are able to work with them. As Brian mentioned, we are also virtual privacy officers. So think of it as a fractional privacy officer. But ultimately, what we're trying to do, we're not just a privacy firm, we're also a security firm. And when I say security, I mean security governance. And what we try to do is integrate privacy and security together, because what we're seeing is that at the moment, they are very siloed, they're separate, and oftentimes they don't speak to each other, and they have very different policies that go in two different directions, which is a complete waste of time for everybody in the business and creates a lot of inefficiencies. So we try to bring the two together and create efficiencies in your privacy and security solutions.
Excellent. So I think you gave us also another overview about how security, privacy, governance kind of working together. You mentioned your company name, Bamboo. I see people comment on that. A lovely name, of course. My point of view also, Bamboo, I guess you also, so it's a resilience part. Bamboo is not only strong, right, but it's resilient. when you ban, it will go back. So I think that's a very
Yeah, so
important.
so it's agile, it's strong, it's fast growing, but it also spreads its roots. And what we believe at Bamboo is that you really need to have a strong foundation and create your roots. And maybe you're not going to be able to show the benefit of privacy and security right at the get-go, but what you need is that foundation, and then all of a sudden it shoots up really quickly. And we think that shooting up is really the impetus of your success and your business's success, as I'm sure we'll discuss later today.
Excellent. All right. Let's move to Roshan. Can you give a little bit self-introduction about yourself?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm working as part of a Microsoft privacy risk and compliance technical specialist team. More than 15 years experience in security and compliance. But yeah, other than that, personally, I have a lovely family of my daughter and my husband, and we love cooking, going hiking, camping in the summertime. Not very much active in the winter time though. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we do, and we love to do as a family. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so let's back to business, talk about our panel questions. I think you guys already touched on that one. So how, my first question really is, we try to understand why data governance and privacy is so important today. Although everybody knows, oh, it's important, if you don't do that, but how exactly data governance and privacy will impact the business today? So I'd like to hear your insights.
Yeah. So I can start with that.
Sure. Yeah.
So again, so in my presentation, I started with that the data estate is growing, right? So your digital data estate that we call today, it's so complex environment and it's growing. So from a data governance, it is about collecting, storing, and then processing and disposing all these elements from a data governance perspective. And the privacy, as I have talked about, that it's a regulation perspective, right? So you need to make those data available for your data subjects. Now, the impact for the organization is to operationalize that. First, to make a strategy. How do we do it? And then operationalize that, right? So the first step is the identification. They are struggling with identifying that information, whether it's a sensitive data or a PII data, right? So identifying and then protecting. So again, the impact is from management perspective, data management, privacy management, and then those operationalized perspective, cost management perspective, and then not just those, the expert. Do we have the right expertise in our organization to manage those ones, right? So handle those data governance piece or the privacy piece, and also the technology. So what type of technology is coming? Which one is the right tool? Where we can invest, right? So those are all the questions that the organization have, but the impact is really really very big from operationalized perspective. Yeah.
Excellent. In fact, the data is the new gold in today's economy,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
as you mentioned, every department need to have process data. Doesn't matter it's a custom data, financial data, or like anything in the database. But because everybody need to use that, it's so important, and the
Yes.
problem will actually impact everybody as well. So that's great insight. Sharon, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different angles I could take on it, and I think privacy professionals usually take the route of using a scare tactic, right? If you don't have privacy, then you're going to have privacy breaches, which leads to reputational harm, to significant costs, so on and so forth. But quite honestly, I prefer not to take that approach. And the way that I see it is that privacy can have a very positive impact on your business. Most individuals, believe it or not, are concerned about their privacy, and they're concerned about what companies are doing with their information. But what we are seeing is that they're still using the technology despite their concern over their privacy. And it's because they don't have a choice. If they want to use the technology, they have to give up their consent and give up their personal information. However, the companies that are able to demonstrate trust with their consumers by implementing and operationalizing privacy and being able to demonstrate to their consumers that they take their privacy seriously and not just, say so in their privacy policy, but when I say demonstrate, actually use easy to use or easy to understand language, create easy UX experience, actually inform and be transparent about their practices. That's when you build trust. And once you have the trust, you build loyalty with your consumers, you gain more consumers, which means you gain more data, which means you are much more profitable. And the concern is that a lot of companies are just kind of saying that they do privacy without doing it properly. But those are the companies that end up getting themselves into trouble because there are nonprofit organizations and other, I guess, watchers out there who will name those companies. So if you're doing privacy right, privacy is an enabler and can have a very positive impact on your business. And can really
Excellent.
be a differentiator. Like,
Right.
and I've seen it's a home name brand, one of my clients use privacy to their advantage by demonstrating that they're different from their competitors because they actually implement privacy, and that builds a trust with consumers.
That's a great point. And so, like Sharon, you mentioned, so privacy on one side really protect your customers' privacy. On the other side, become a differentiator to kind of provide an extra value to the customer. So if two companies have a similar services, which one you go with? You definitely go to someone who will more care about your privacy. So that's actually bring the
Yeah.
Absolutely,
competitive
right.
edge there.
Yeah,
So
and it can also become part of your brand, right?
right.
And that's where it should eventually go. And that's exactly what happened with one of our clients. It's now on their packaging.
Yeah.
And when you're comparing the two products on a shelf and you see one that takes your information, your personal information more seriously,
Yeah.
you're drawn to that because we do care about our privacy.
Excellent. Wonderful. All right. So, great point. I actually learned quite a lot. Let's move on to the next question. And in Roshan's presentation, we talk quite a lot about the challenges, right? So there's all kind of challenges. So here I'd like to get a little more deeper understanding as well. So what do you see some common challenges right now in the regarding the data governance and privacy? What are the common challenges people may not be a large organization, yeah, like an individual or even like a small business can encounter those challenges? Maybe Sharon, you first?
Mm. Yeah, I think Roshan touched on something that is really important, which is not knowing what information you have and where you have it. And when I work again with the small to medium businesses, that's the number one challenge that they have. We go in and we say, what personal information do you collect? And they're like, we don't. And then of course, we dig deeper and there's so much information. So one of the challenges is, working in a black box, not knowing what information you're collecting, but also how you're using that information. You might know what information you're collecting, and you might be entitled to collect that information and use it in a different way. But then you have a different business function that says, that information may be relevant to me as well, and I can use it in this way. And now we're talking about using data for a different purpose. And you may not have a connection to use it in that purpose. You might not have proper consent. You may not have provided proper transparency to the user that you are going to be using their information in that way. So that is a big challenge. The other major challenge that I'm seeing is, and I touched on this before, is the different silos. And everyone just points to the other one saying, well, that's privacy is your problem or your problem, but no one works together at it. And the truth is that it is absolutely everybody's problem, from the engineers to the designers to the sales rep, HR, finance, logistics. Everyone has a role to play in privacy because everyone is touching personal information. And that also includes a silo between privacy and security. And unfortunately, there's so much inefficiency happening because they're not talking to each other. They're not creating programs that integrate the two together so that they can work together. When you have privacy to support you in whatever function you are, privacy will be your backbone, and they will protect you when things are not going well for you, either because your function experienced a breach or there was some issue with your product. Privacy is there to support you. Unfortunately, privacy often gets a bad rap because they think, oh, privacy is there to stop me from doing what I want to do. It's not at all. We're there to enable you to do what you want, but making sure that you're not getting yourself into trouble while you're doing it.
Great points. So one is how do you discover like a kind of like an asset management in cybersecurity term? So where are those data? What kind of data you have? The other is the silos among the team, practice, or different way to handle that. Although those are like in Roshan's presentation, security privacy actually share a lot of commonalities there. But then it could be two teams to handle that. They duplicate work or they don't talk to each other. So at the end of the day, how do we communicate and work as one
Exactly.
team?
Especially in an incident,
Yeah.
an incident happens and you have privacy doing their thing and security doing their thing. And there's, there should be communication, there should be coordination between the two. And when there isn't, you may be creating a greater risk in being uncoordinated.
Great point. And all right, Roshan, any thoughts from your side?
No, I think that's to the point. I mean, those are the main challenges, right? So identification and working together from a privacy and a security perspective. So another aspect or another perspective is that the goal of the company or the objective of the company, right? So if those are not into your strategy for next 5 years, sometimes you don't have budget, you don't have manpower to do that. And I see there was a question that, okay, once you have operationalized those controls, there is an upkeep, right, to maintain those. So how we are going to do those. So those are also some of the challenges, right? So your budget, your manpower, your skill set, and most importantly, strategy and the vision for your company. Where do you want to go? How you're protecting your data estate, your privacy. On Sharon's note, that how you want to be stand out from other organizations, right? So to tell that how you're protecting privacy of your consumers or of your customers. So those are some of the strategic vision that I see needs to be incorporated from the very beginning in the senior leadership.
From
That's
a manager elements.
yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry, Brian. That's such a good point, Roshan, that you raised about budget. So what we're seeing is that companies don't put or haven't been putting a lot of money in or haven't allotted a budget towards privacy. And once they start to realize that privacy is an issue for them and they don't have the budget, they're creating what we call privacy debt, right? Or security debt even. And it's one thing over the next and one more risk and one more risk, and we'll get to it, but we can't because we don't have the budget or the expertise to hire someone or the budget to hire someone that is an expert to help us kind of relieve some of that debt. And it becomes such a big problem that finally, when you do have the budget and you have to retroactively remediate some of those risks, you are putting the business in at such a difficult position because you now may have delays in your sales. Resources are now taken up to remediate those risks, amongst so many other issues, design costs, when you could have started right from the beginning, which is what we call privacy by design. You build and you design with privacy in mind so that you don't have that privacy debt and you don't cause delays and extra costs and potential breaches, risks to your business.
That's a very great point. I think one of the audience also put there. So while we on the protection, detection, and also classify the data, if we don't have that data in the first place, a lot of things won't happen. Back to Sharon's point, if well, based on the privacy best practice, if some information we don't need to collect, right? So that actually help a lot in the beginning. But if people don't pay attention to that or they don't follow the best practice, then those data in your system, then later on the cloud, on this one, on that, on different database, then all of a sudden, back to your point is the debt of this, right? So carry on. The budget for this to solve the problem is not just at the beginning, I don't let data in. Then I need to look at this multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, on-premise, so significantly multiply the budget. All right.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but if you're breached and you have all this data that you shouldn't have in the first place, that breach is much bigger, which means a larger class action lawsuit, larger fees and fines, and greater remediations.
Right. Okay. When we talk about data governance and privacy, we cannot just avoid talking regulations and compliance. Although Sharon said we don't want to scare you, but this is things, right? So we have to pay attention to, especially for some common regulations, compliance you need to pay attention to. So I know this is probably Sharon's expertise. But I like to ask both of you just to share your insights. So what are some common regulatory and compliance requirements we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I mean, in Canada, we have a federal privacy legislation called PIPEDA, and we actually have a bill called Bill C-27, which is meant to replace PIPEDA. There's also, many of you may have heard of something called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and that's in Europe. So like, why am I even bringing up European privacy legislation? Because even if your company is in Canada, but it is collecting data from the EU or the UK, you are bound by that legislation and you must comply with it. And at the moment, the GDPR in Europe and the UK is the strictest, most prescriptive privacy legislation. And that legislation, which came into force in 2018, kind of created wildfires everywhere because we're starting to see similar legislation popping up in multiple jurisdictions. So for example, California also has a very robust privacy legislation called the CCPA. Again, why am I bringing up CCPA in California? If you are a company collecting personal information from California residents or any other American states, they all have different legislations, you're going to need to comply with that legislation. So the privacy legislation that you need to comply with comes from where the data comes from, right? Not where you are located. So that's number one. What's really kind of like some main concepts that we're starting to see coming out of legislation, so main principles or requirements include being able to demonstrate that you have a privacy program. So that means policies and procedures and processes and training. And I'm not talking about your website privacy policy. That's like this tiny little thing that you have to do. I'm talking about full-blown programs. Have you thought about it? What controls have you put in place in your business to remediate privacy risks? And how have you trained your staff? Have you created a culture? The other one that we're starting to see, I guess not starting, but has always been an issue and a responsibility that comes from legislation is third-party due diligence. So about 35% of privacy breaches or privacy or personal information misuse is a result of your vendors and you sharing information with vendors. And so you have to do your due diligence from both a privacy and security perspective to make sure that they are responsibly handling the personal information that you are providing to them. At the end of the day, you are the custodian of that information. So if your vendor has a breach or misuses the personal information that you furnish it with, it is your responsibility. And so you are on the hook as well, right? Some other things is, of course, retention. We've seen some large breaches happening over the past few years, and the regulators are always talking about the lack of retention or the fact that they are retaining too much information. There's a lack of retention policy and schedule. So you are not allowed to retain information indefinitely, personal information. You can retain it for as long as you have a purpose to retain it for, which is the original purpose that the user gave you the information to use. And otherwise, you either have to discard it, and I don't mean in your archives, I mean permanently delete it, or anonymize and properly anonymize, not pseudonymize, not de-identify, but anonymize the information, because then it's not personal information. I know I'm talking a lot, but one more thing that I think is really important is cross-border transfers. So if you are collecting data from the EU and you're storing it in what we call an inadequate country, such as the US, you need to have proper agreements in place with the vendor or the parties that is storing that information on your behalf. And you need to have supplementary measures like extra protection so that, for example, government authorities will not have access to that information, especially if it's sitting on the cloud. So there's a lot to unpack in just that last one, the cross-border transfers, but that is one of the really big topics that we're talking about in the privacy industry right now.
Wow,
Right, I know I just rambled on.
That's
I
great.
also learned a lot. So thanks,
Yeah,
Sharon.
so I was just listening every word from a kind of previous litigator. So I think quick what I hear really is one is there are several globally, locally, globally. There are so many, quite many privacy laws you need to pay attention to. And also Sharon mentioned some certain areas you need to really pay attention to. One is your responsibility. It doesn't matter where you reside, really is where your data coming from. So that's critical. And also not only you need to take care, but you need to make sure your third party, so whoever work with you, also you need to take due diligence. Then coming to this transfer cross border, and there are many, many details, I'm sure. So if Sharon has some like workshop, people really encourage you to learn more on specific topics. Today we only have a very short time, but yeah, so this is really important, and understand what do you need to do and comply with that. That's probably like a first couple of steps you need to pay attention to the governance and the compliance. And thank you very much for your for sharing this, Sharon. And then back to this question. So I like to also spin that a little bit to from technology side. So data governance and privacy, of course, impacted by regulation and compliance. On the other side, technology also impact this one a lot. So for example, when we have so many compliance, like those regulatory requirement, how do you find the right technology to manage those compliance? Right. So, and how, when you have a data on the cloud or using AI, so how do we leverage those one to help with the data governance and privacy? So maybe Rosen, can you may share some insights from your perspective?
Yeah. So from a cloud perspective, so this is a shared responsibility. When organization have a cloud and store their information in a cloud, it's a shared responsibility between the organization and the cloud provider, right? So so what I mean by that is that some aspects of privacy controls, the cloud provider will be solely responsible. They need to do their due diligence on that. They need to do their third-party audits and the reports and I mean yearly audit, and then they need to keep those up to date. So whenever the regulatory body ask for this, so they have to provide those documentations, right? So on the other side, the organization who are hosting their data into a cloud, they also need to be responsible for certain type of controls. For example, the data is their core. So what type of data they're keeping in there, right? So identification of those data. So protecting those data from an endpoint perspective. So think about this way. So you have your cloud, you're storing that cloud, but you're accessing that data from multiple devices. It could be an endpoint, it could be a mobile device, a laptop, and any other devices. So those devices are organizations' responsibility, how they're going to protect that, how they're going to maintain the access of that device. That's the organization. So yeah, so that's my take on cloud, is that it's a shared responsibility. As an organization, you have the right to ask for those audit data from your cloud provider. So are they compliant with privacy regulations? Are they compliant with any security framework, for example, NIST, ISO? So you can definitely go and then ask for those, so that you are ensured that yes, this is the right cloud for me, and I can keep that data here, and I can do my business very it's about trust, right? So trustworthily I can do the business. So that's from a cloud perspective. And the AI side, so the organization or the business who are making a tool that has that AI enabled, artificial intelligence enabled, machine learning enabled, right? So for those companies, they also need to declare that I am doing this artificial intelligence with some controls, and I also I'm not, I mean, I'm maintaining all those trust that this technology, we have tested it clearly, and it's not going to take control of all of your data. No, this is not doing that. So those type of declaration needs to come again from that organization who are building those tools, right? Yeah, so those are some of the things on top of my head right now. So yeah.
Excellent. So the keywords I get from you is the trust, right? So the trust when you
Exactly.
provide like I say, cloud, like Microsoft provided the cloud solutions, how do you bring that trust for your customers? I understand this is a shared responsibility.
Exactly.
Customer, you also need to take care of your endpoint, like your mobile phone, your laptop. That's totally your
Yes.
responsibility. But then how do you share this responsibility together? Because I
Right.
think that Sharon also mentioned that at the end of the day, it's not data privacy governance is not just one company's job or one person's job. It's a shared. So you have a third party, you have your partner, you have your clients. So it's actually the data is flowing, right? So everywhere. So you need to consider what kind of things you can do. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the next questions. It really is, I'm actually thinking about from a small business point of view, right? So for large organization, you probably already have quite many people working in the data governance privacy team. They have a relatively enough budget to run this one. But for small business, like say even one person's business or like 1 to 10 people, like 20 people. So how do they start? They know, they probably understand, or startup, they understand the importance of governance and privacy. They want to do it, but they don't know where to start, how much money they need. They may probably have many, many questions, right? So how can they start with the data governance and the privacy? Could be from practice point of view, or could be technology point of view. I know two obvious answers. One is go to Bamboo Consulting, the other is go to Microsoft. But besides those company things, just share some of the best practice.
Yeah,
Sharon, want to
so
give a start? Yeah.
yeah, when I work with smaller companies and I have an initial discussion with them, I try to figure out why is it that they're coming to speak to me now? Like, what is it that's driving them to want to comply with privacy or implement a privacy program? And I get various answers, and depending on their answer and their need, we'll develop what I call the essentials for them until they're ready to put more budget into it. Maybe they need to get more funding before, you know, they proceed to a full-blown program. But there are some companies that come to us because they are a B2B company and they can't get their first client because when their client sends them a vendor due diligence questionnaire to fill out, the client can't fill it out because everything is a no, right? Like their prospective client will ask them, do you have this kind of policy or this kind of program or this kind of process relating to privacy? And if they can't demonstrate that they have it, then they're not going to win the client. And that usually triggers the companies to say, oh crap, like we need to get our house in order. So what do we do? So where do we usually start with those kind of companies? Number one, we need to figure out who's going to be accountable for privacy. That's probably the first question that most companies will ask you if you're a B2B. Now the truth is that you can hire or you can delegate that role to anybody in your business, but are they really going to be able to identify privacy risks, right? It is no good to you if they can't actually operate privacy. So the question becomes, do you make sure that you train somebody in-house? And I've seen a lot of people do that, and people are starting to get really interested in privacy. And someone in the company might say, I want to be that champion for you. I'll take courses, get certified. I'll start doing privacy within the business. Or you hire someone to do it. Most companies can't hire someone full-time, so they do someone part-time or consultant or whatever. The next thing is data mapping, and we had already talked about this quite a bit. Data mapping is really identifying where the data is, what you're collecting, why you're collecting it for, what consent do you have, who do you share it with internally and externally, what's your retention around that data. It's giving you a bird's eye view of all of the data within the business, right? And that helps you start to identify risks within that overview. So data map is probably the first thing that you're going to want to do because you can't, like, you don't know what to protect if you don't know what you have or where you have it. The next thing is an incident response plan. And from a privacy perspective, you can have a privacy incident response plan. I know many people know about your cyber incident response plan, but from a privacy perspective, you have legal obligations to report a breach to the regulators if you meet a certain threshold, like if there's a significant harm or a risk of significant harm to an individual, and you need to notify those individuals. So there needs to be some sort of a plan in place. What are we going to do if an incident happens? You need to record it. There are record-keeping requirements, and you need to do it within a certain period of time. So having that playbook which interacts with the cyber incident response plan is key. And why is it key to the small businesses? Because one breach can completely cripple your company. Large companies like a Microsoft or a Google or anybody, they can survive breaches because they're well equipped. They're also well protected. But a small company, they're the ones that are the perfect trigger for hacks or breaches because they don't have anything to protect them, infrastructure to protect them, or processes. So having that in place is essential for small to medium businesses, as well as access and correction policy. And I know Roshan talked a little bit about access and correction. So individuals that you're collecting personal information from are allowed to ask you to give them all of their information. Tell me what you have about me. Give me access to all that information. And in some instances, they may even be allowed to say, delete everything that you have about me. And you need to do that within 30 days or less. Are you going to be able to do that? And I know it seems, oh yeah, it's easy. Like we'll just find their information. It's not as easy as you think it is. And sometimes you may even need to engage in e-discovery, right? To try to find the information, or even going to your legacy systems or archives to find that information. And how are you going to deliver it to them in a very secure way and in a way that they can actually read it and understand it? So lots of processes around that. And then it's also really important to have privacy impact assessments. And that goes to your previous question that I wanted to address, around emerging technologies and trust around that emerging technologies. Privacy impact assessments are a legal requirement in some legislations that says you must do this assessment before you implement a new technology that processes a large amount of personal information. So the PIA, Privacy Impact Assessment, focuses just on that technology or just on the service or just on the process, and you start digging into what privacy risks there are with the hopes of remediating those risks so that, of course, you're not putting the business at risk.
Very good, very good. So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
yeah, sorry. And I think on top of that, I think what we see also from a small business, when they do not have the manpower, as Sharon mentioned, that who are going to wear that hat as a privacy officer, right? So they may not have that manpower. So sometimes we see that they outsource it to another company who handles their privacy or legal things, right? Or e-discovery or legal things. So yeah, so that could be another approach, that if you're a very small company, you don't know where to start, maybe you can outsource it to another company who are very well versed in this domain and who has the skill set, and then they can do it for you, right? So that's another
Bamboo.
there you go.
Thank you.
So what I hear really is, I think a couple of takeaways I've listened so far. One is really need to understand your business needs, right? So that's the number one. So why I need this one? Actually, a lot of times, actually, it's an enabler for you. Otherwise, without this, you cannot even do the business with or grow your business. So you have to have that one. Then you need to first start with very important data mapping to understand what do you have. Then you also need to put in some incident response plan and assessment plan, or depends on your business, right? So different areas you need to pay attention to. And also very important, associated with the right people, right consultant, right technology. So although I don't want to directly mention you two's name, but yeah, so you need to really to find people. A lot of times you need to find the people who really understand and who really practice this field a lot. Then you can get a lot of benefits from there. All right, so let's move on. I think we're kind of getting to the end of our presentation. One important area I want to touch on is the skills development and also capability and talent development. Like cybersecurity, we lack a lot of cyber talent. In the data governance, in the privacy part, we also need, because I think this is such an important area, we need more professionals working in this field. And when we speak of this talent development, one is, okay, what kind of skills we need? If you are hiring someone to do this, what kind of skills or capabilities you need? Plus, I think some people ask as well, what kind of industry certifications, right? If you want to get from there, plus not just the knowledge, you need to certify it. So what kind of things you can get there? So with those two, anyone can start share your insights.
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like Roshan and my answers will be very different because we have different experiences,
Yeah.
and we come at privacy from different angles. So I'll speak to like if you want to become a privacy consultant or if you want to take the lead role in your own business as, you know, the privacy lead or privacy officer. How do you do that? First, there is a certificate that you can take. It's called the CIPP. And depending on, I'm sorry, depending on whether you want to be certified for Canada or Europe, it will slightly change. Now, the CIPP, it is, I guess, hosted by the IAPP, the International Association for Privacy Professionals. That is our kind of like a big privacy association. So any certificates from them is very well recognized. CIPP, CIPM, CIPPC, like lots of different certificates. Of course, certain universities offer certificates that you can take virtually or in person. But in terms of the skills, it's funny, a lot of people think that you need to be a lawyer. You absolutely do not need to be a lawyer. It just so happens that lots of lawyers are, you know, privacy officers. I guess because, you know, you do need to read some law and interpret it. But the truth is, I get a lot of clients saying to me, oh, I guess our in-house lawyer will be our privacy officer. And I say to them, that's fine. Like they'll understand the law, but are they going to operationalize privacy? Do they have the time? Do you want them to waste time following up with people about like the risk register and have you completed this remediation for this particular risk? These lawyers should be like sitting down, reviewing your contracts, not following up with people or figuring out how to operationalize privacy. So I actually think most lawyers, like they don't need to be the privacy officer. If you're thinking of what kind of skills you need to be someone that is really curious because privacy never ends. Like if you go away for a week, like I always get worried. When I go away for a week on vacation, I know when I'm back, like the entire privacy landscape has already changed on me. Every single day, something changes. There's something new in the news that you need to constantly be on top of. If you don't like learning and you don't like staying on top of everything, you want everything to be static, privacy is not the place for you. If you love technology and how it collects information and what it does, like new things, and there's always something to learn and you can't stay behind. Otherwise, you won't recognize a risk. So being analytical, loving to learn, being curious, those are key elements to being a privacy professional.
Excellent points. Thank you very much, Sharon. And
Yeah.
Roshan?
Yeah, so I would really like to re-emphasize on Sharon's last points about being being curious, being passionate, right? So first of all, find your passion, find to see that if this field is really for you. So before going to a certification, the way I would take or I have taken in the past is that making my foundation strong, right? So how do I do that? I do take like online courses, right? So there are offline courses available with the university, with some institutions, but online courses are also available from Coursera, from Udemy, and some other courses. So if you are interested to learn about data governance, what does it mean? Go for one of the courses. And you'll be amazed to see that those courses are taught by the renowned professors of some very good universities, right? So from that, if you still think that, okay, this data governance is my area or data analytics is my area, I'm really finding it's really interesting, right? So then the next step could be to start a certification, right? Even talking to the industry professionals. So use your LinkedIn, use your professional network to have a coffee chat to learn about what's going on in your organization, right? So, and what are the challenges you are facing, or how you are solving those problems. So get some insights from the industry experts, make connection with those people. So that's the another step, right? The next step would be again again, it's ever-changing topic every second, every minute, whether it's privacy or security, data governance, records management, or e-discovery. It's just changing every day and every minute. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with all those fancy words like blockchain and AI and then BitLock, right? So all those words are coming every day, every minute. So take it slowly. You don't have to be knowledgeable for every domain. Just pick a domain and start slowly. Start your start building your knowledge on that, and then professional experience on that, and that will help you to find your career path on that, right? So that's all from my side.
Excellent.
Really good advice. Yeah.
And so those are really great points. So I think Roshan mentioned, how do you start? How do you learn? How do you build? And Sharon mentioned all those good, really what's the good characters or traits about the talents. How privacy, like security, is a dynamic field, right? So it's changed every day. How do you you need to be curious if you really want to be successful in this field. And another great point is you need to learn from our industry experts, people like Roshan, like Sharon. So they have years of experience. And from our perspective, from cyber tech and risk, we kind of organize those events to give it the platform for those stars can share their insights. And by the way, as Sharon mentioned, IAPP, International Association Privacy Professional. And I don't know if you know, cyber tech and risk actually is a pre-approved provider for IAPP. So when you join today's event, you can claim your CPE from IAPP for the credits.
Cool.
So you pretty much can get 1.5 hours CPE. If you already got the certification, you can count that as a continuing education credits. And for other certifications, including cybersecurity one, you can also use today's to claim 1.5 hour credits. So that's keep you current, also learn from our industry experts. All right, so that's pretty much come to the end of our session. I really enjoying talking with you guys. I learned a lot today and many great points. And the good thing is we record this, so if you miss anything, you can go back to watch that. And before we leave, right? So it's almost we talk more than for 45 minutes. So before we leave, do you have, if I ask you to give the one suggestion, just a top recommendation to our audience, it could be anything. It may not be just a technology, or could be any practice or tips. If you can make one departure recommendation, what would you like to say?
I think it would be similar to like what we've talked about before, that privacy is a journey. And you're not going to get it all done at once. And it's also not a check the box exercise. We talked about privacy is always constantly evolving, landscape is evolving, legislation, consumer expectations of how you handle their information always changes. And so to say that, you know, yep, we're compliant now, let's put the pen down. Tomorrow you're not going to be compliant. And in fact, no company is compliant. And if they say they are, they're lying. It really is a journey, and you got to keep going, which means you got to put budget into it. You got to create a privacy culture. There needs to be that tone from the top, and it needs to be part of the DNA to your business to be a successful business.
Right. Stay current. That's very important.
Exactly.
All right. Roshan?
Yeah, from my side, I think it's the mindset, right? So So your mindset about privacy and also security is the key to your success. So from an end user perspective, from a customer or from a company, organization, custodian perspective, it's all about your mindset to have that privacy posture. And that's it.
Excellent. The mindset, because there are a lot of mindset we need to adapt, right? So not only just from privacy governance, like say we move to cloud, so it's changed the way we are doing things. So you have to adapt the things. So the world moving so fast, you need to catch up and stay current. And all right, so that's pretty much the end of our panel discussion. Again, Roshan from Microsoft, Sharon from Bamboo Data Consulting, and they spend their valuable time coming to share their insights. I hope you learn a lot. I learned a lot. So I like to ask everyone online to give them a virtual applause. Oh, virtual pat. Thank you very much. Although I know you couldn't do that physically, but virtually. Thank you very much to our experts coming to share the knowledge.